Good morning. Imagine if I proposed a new federal program, and I promised that it would make gas cheaper, it would make food cheaper, it would make the environment cleaner, and at the same time it would not only boost U.S. exports, but improve our trade relations around the world. Of course, we can't start a new federal program to do all these things, but we can eliminate one. Federal ethanol policy drives up gas prices and hurts fuel economy. It encourages farmers to plant corn for ethanol instead of other crops, and that makes it more expensive to make bread, beef, and even beer. It puts marginal agricultural land into production and takes more fossil energy to produce than it ultimately saves. And it costs taxpayers an estimated $6.3 billion per year. No wonder writer Robert Bryce called it the stupidest federal subsidy. Eliminating the 54-cent per gallon subsidy would mean real savings for taxpayers and real savings for families at the gas station and at the grocery store. This is just the first of 50 specific spending cuts that I will propose over the next 50 days. In 50 days, voters of New Hampshire will decide the direction of the Republican Party in the September 9th primary. I believe low taxes are the result of low spending, and I want the Republican Party to return to its core values of limited government and personal responsibility. And I'm willing to show how we get there. I challenge my opponents to offer their alternatives for cutting federal spending. We need more than talking points and empty promises. Where are you going to cut? Over the next 50 days, I'll propose over $20 billion in specific spending cuts. I ask the people of New Hampshire to share their ideas. What programs have outlived their usefulness or never should have been created in the first place? Over the next 50 days, I'll take on pork barrel projects. I'll challenge corporate welfare. I'll talk about long-distance trains, congressional perks, and secret earmarks. I may even walk down Sesame Street. I can't promise that every cut I'm proposing will save $6.3 billion, but as they say in Washington, a billion here, a billion there, pretty soon you're talking about real money. Voters are used to politicians promising to tighten their belts, but never getting around to saying exactly where they'd vote to cut. After all, every federal dollar goes to someone, and that someone's a voter who's going to support continuing that program. If we won't risk losing the vote of somebody receiving a wasteful federal subsidy, we don't deserve the vote of the taxpayer who's paying the bill. Thank you. I welcome your questions.
Can you give more examples? You mentioned a couple there. What's Sesame Street?
Sesame Corporation for Public Broadcasting receives a massive federal subsidy, and obviously there are plenty of alternatives out in the market. That'll be one of the 50 ways in 50 days that we'll be cutting federal spending.
Any others specifically you can?
We'll do one a day. Today is ethanol, and every day between now and then, we want to focus this race on cutting federal spending. It is a cornerstone issue in New Hampshire. Spending is out of control at the local level. We saw at town meeting, voters rejecting spending increases. It's out of control at the state level with a 17.5% increase in the state budget. And it's out of control at the federal level, where we have a $3 trillion budget for the first time. So I think rather than proposing a big list today and then tomorrow talking about something else, I want to tell the voters of New Hampshire that every day I will be talking about cutting federal spending.
Well, as you know, Grant, most of these cuts you're going to target over the next 50 days don't come to Congress in a separate bill. Like most of them come in the middle of an omnibus bill, many of them without a hearing, in an amendment in the conference committee. It sounds like you're going to be voting against all kinds of spending, including a lot of spending that comes to New Hampshire.
I will be voting against spending for the entire country, and that means occasionally voting against money that comes to New Hampshire. If voters want somebody to go to Washington to bring home the bacon, I'm not their candidate, and that's their decision to make. But if voters are sick of people trying to buy their vote instead of earn their vote, I think I'm that candidate. And every federal project that is part of an omnibus bill should be voted up or down on its own. You should be able to amend it out of a bill in an open process. That's the problem with earmarks, is they're passed without debate, without review. And if a federal project is worthy of getting funding, it's worthy of an open debate. So I promise not to take any earmarks myself. And we're going to open the federal budget process to public scrutiny and accountability. And I'm going to outline the programs that I'm going to vote against.
And would you agree that it's, that politically at least, the ethanol subsidy is probably one of the easiest cuts to be for coming from the Northeast, given that we can't even have too much ethanol in our fuel in the winter and be able to start the car?
Yeah, it's politically popular, except for those people that are sending out the checks and the people getting the checks. And unfortunately, ethanol is far too popular in Congress. There's far too many votes for it. I would be one more vote against it. Yeah, New Hampshire doesn't receive a lot of it, but there are going to be programs over the next 50 days that people in New Hampshire do receive. And it may not be the most politically popular thing to propose cutting that federal program, but that shouldn't stop me from doing it. And if I'm not willing to show a willingness to address even the sacred cows of the federal budget, then I don't think voters should trust us to take care of their dollars. That's the problem the Republican Party's had over the years. So there are going to be programs on this list that maybe aren't as well known as ethanol, don't have the price tag that ethanol has, and maybe even be more politically popular than ethanol is here in New Hampshire. But over 50 days, we'll get to all corners of the federal budget.
And does it disappoint you at all that, given the state of the budget, the deficit, if you ask the American people what are the most important issues to you, the deficit and the budget is down around 7 or 8, well behind things like the economy, the Iraq War, energy, healthcare, education. How is this kind of platform going to galvanize voters support?
I've been hearing a lot of dissatisfaction over the past 5 months with spending in general, that especially in this economy, when people are struggling to make ends meet, that the federal government doesn't see any problem increasing spending on a stimulus package that didn't stimulate the economy, on a mortgage bailout that's not going to help home prices, on a farm bill that makes food more expensive. These 50 cuts are in addition to the one-time boondoggles, like the mortgage bailout, like a farm bill, like a stimulus package. These are annual programs that we pay for every year. So I think tying it into the economy as a whole, tying it into taxes, tying it into the general dissatisfaction with a Congress that has a 9% approval rating, I do think it is on people's minds, and I do think it's going to get some relevance. Again, not because I'm just talking about cutting spending, but I'm proposing specific examples. And I hope my opponents would come out and say what they'd be willing to cut. On ethanol, for example, Paul Hodes voted for the $300 billion farm bill that greatly increased ethanol subsidies and mandates. That's a $300 billion price tag. Ethanol is a big part of that.